Oh man, so many decisions. Do you take? Do you leave it? Do you do something else? In this game, black did something else. b5, putting even more questions. Look at this. What is happening? Check out the central tension among all these pawns. You can capture this way, you can capture that way, you can recapture this way or that way. What on earth is happening? Welcome to Kasparov-Karpov. Welcome to game 6 of the match. The score at the moment is 3-2. Karpov has won 1 game so far. Karpov has 1 win and 5 draws in this match. If you are new here, hello, my name is William. I make chess videos and I hope you find this one to be highly valuable. Let's see what happens in this game. Kasparov has white, Karpov has black. The game began. d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, b6. We have the Queen's Indian defense. g3. Black has the option to put the bishop here to compete along this diagonal against this bishop, or the option played by Karpov, which is bishop a6 firstly to attack this pawn. Even though white has central space, these pawns can be targets for black. b3 played, a normal move to defend your center. Bishop b4, check. White defends with bishop d2. Karpov retreats with bishop e7, bishop g2, castle, castle. By move 8, these two top players have already castled. d5 striking in the center, putting a question to this pawn. Knight e5, unleashing the bishop, potentially attacking the rook, so black cannot take this pawn. c6, reinforcing your center. Pawn is defended by the knight, blunting this bishop. Good move from black. Bishop c3, cool move. Putting this bishop on this diagonal, it can tuck back, but more importantly, so then the knight can come in the game. Knight d7, retreating this one instead. You can't go here because knight takes c6 attacks both bishop and queen. That's why Karpov had to play this funny looking move, knight d7, because this knight has to keep an eye on this pawn. The knights come off. Take, take. Still, there's central tension. Knight d2. This is the focus point for this game. I'm going to draw in all these arrows again. White has knight and pawn defending it. Black has pawn and bishop attacking it. This is the focus point at the moment. White keeps his pawn on c4, but black tries to attack it. Rook c8, expecting this file to open up in the future, so you might as well put the rook on a sensible square. e4, putting lots of questions in the center. Oh man, so many decisions. Do you take? Do you leave it? Do you do something else? In this game, black did something else. b5, putting even more questions. Look at this. What is happening? Check out the central tension among all these pawns. You can capture this way, you can capture that way, you can recapture this way or that way. What on earth is happening? So many decisions. It's only move 13. Check out the central tension. How does white react? How does Kasparov react? He doesn't. He just keeps the tension. This is a sign of a top player. If you don't know what to do, or maybe he just follows the best move, rook e1. Black chose to take, resolving the tension, clearing up an issue. After b takes c4, knight b6 was played, so forcing another decision. So let me draw in the arrows again. Knight, pawn, and the bishop put a question to this pawn. Kasparov now takes. He could push, getting more space, but he chose to take. I don't like this decision from Gary, because after take, the rook is now in the game. Remember, a few moves ago, Karpov moved his rook here, expecting in the future, and the future is now. The rook has an open file to work with. Rook c1. Rooks are putting pressure on this bishop. Black now puts pressure on the rook with bishop a3. White has to keep the rook on the file, so he plays rook c2 to defend the bishop. Knight a4, attacking the bishop along with the rook. The bishop has to hide, so it goes in the corner. The rooks come off. Take, take. Queen a5. Have you ever seen this before? You've got bishop, queen, knight, bishop, all on the same file. The reason black got his queen out of the way is so then the rook can come here facing the queen. Queen just gets out of the way. White saw that. Doesn't matter, black's going to put his rook on an open file anyway. Rooks belong on open files, controlling lots of key squares. Knight b3, attacking the queen. Queen moves, defending the bishop, controlling all these dark squares, keeping an eye on the rook. d5, great move. This bishop in the corner has done nothing all game. Now it has a target, only defended by the king, so it's good to push your pawn forward, and also this could become a passed pawn. Black now takes. This is the new focus point. Bishop, queen. Defend this pawn. Maybe this pawn can become a really, really good asset. Knight c3, attacking queen and pawn. White doesn't want to play this because you give up that amazing bishop. So Kasparov puts his queen in the middle, offering a queen trade, knowing his position is good. Queen d4. Black accepts the trade. Take. Now we have a knight in the middle. Black goes pawn grabbing. He takes that pawn, but does this waste a bit of time? Look at White's pieces. Let me draw all this in again. This pawn controls c6, e6. This bishop can sneak out to attack this rook. This rook controls all these squares. When that knight moves out the way, then this bishop is controlling lots of squares. So there are so many possibilities, even though at the moment, Black actually has 2 passed pawns on the right. Let's see what happens. Knight c6. Knight is very well supported with this pawn and the bishop. Attacking this pawn as well, controlling lots of key squares. Can't go there at the moment, you got your bishop. But it is a possibility for the future. Bishop comes back to c5. It's not doing anything at the moment on that square. Bishop h3 attacking the rook. The rook goes in the corner. Doesn't feel safe to go anywhere. Can't go here due to rook. Can't go here due to the knight. Might as well tuck itself back at home. Then later it can come back in the game. Rook a8. Bishop d4 offering a trade. Take. King f8, d6. Every pawn push allows you to control 2 new squares. d6 now controls e7, c7, potentially allowing the rook to come in. Also, when you push a pawn like this bishop can sneak back, attacking the rook, controlling this wonderful diagonal. Knight c3. The knight has gone pawn grabbing. Well, after you've gone pawn grabbing, time to come back in the game, assisting the advance of this pawn to become a future queen. Knight c6, controlling lots of squares. Really, it's the e7 square. Bishop b7, attacking this knight. Got to flush out this knight. It is so dangerous. Gary defends with bishop g2. Maybe something's gone a bit wrong for White, because this is known as a self-pin. White is in charge of this open file. It's time for Black to get his share of the open file. So rook e8. The rooks compete against each other on this open file. Kasparov does not want to trade rooks. No way. He is down 2 pawns on this side of the board. So he blocks with the knight. Now the bishops compete against each other on this diagonal. Just because they compete doesn't mean you need to trade. Karpov plays a really cool move here with f6. He would rather get rid of this knight than get rid of this bishop. Kasparov now throws in an in-between move. Just because you attack my piece does not mean I have to move it. He plays d7, attacking the rook. Karpov, very cool. Rook just sidesteps. Bishop takes bishop. Pawn takes knight. Bishop c6, locking it in. Bishop defends the pawn. It attacks a pawn which is being defended. And at the moment, White's got this. King e7. The king is getting closer. But it looks like he can take with check. No, double attack, and it just doesn't work. If check, then king d6, attacking both rook and bishop. If rook e8, king c7. And Black is totally winning. There's no way for White to break through. These 2 pawns are 2 runners. King e7 is such a cool move from Karpov because Kasparov now throws in this tactic. But Karpov, perhaps in this game, has seen further than Gary. Bishop takes b5. Sacrificing a bishop temporarily, because after knight takes, rook takes e5, check. Attacking the king and the knight. The king moves, taking the pawn. Take and king c6. Really cool move, king c6. You attack the rook, and you're getting closer to the pawn on the right, assisting the advance of it. The rook moves. Another good move. Rook attacks pawn, so Black just has to deal with that with h6. Rook comes back in the center. Rook e5, rook a8. Rooks belong behind passed pawns. For the attacker, rook a5, just delaying the advance. King b6, attack. Rook moves, push. King f1, a4, king e2, king up, king d2, push, and king c1. When I first saw this, I was wondering, why don't you play this move? I was really wondering why on earth this doesn't happen. It's because eventually white will have to move. That's the problem. You just do this. F3. This. You just literally do nothing. And white is gonna have to give way. Because white has to move the king eventually. So one more move, let's say. And if you move these pawns are gonna become weak. You just do this. This. King can come over. King. Rook. G5. You can even go H5. This pawn is going to drop. This pawn is going to drop. If king goes here, king can come in. Getting at the rook. That's why Kasparov decided to go king c1. And this is a really cool idea coming up. He's trying to set up a fortress. I've never seen this idea before. You're going to see a problem with this fortress soon. King d4, king comes in. Push. King. King b1, this is the idea. When the king is behind a pawn, then the rook is still defending this pawn, which defends everything. Very interesting fortress setup. Rook b8 check, king a1, and a really, really cool move from black. Rook b2, blocking off the rook, attacking this pawn. In the game, rook takes pawn was played, but what happens if this is totally lost? Because the difference in kings is decisive. The black king is so close to those pawns, he's just going to mop them up. So let's just play on a bit. King, king up, king, closer, take, and that's it. If you go here, take, and then this pawn is just going to run up. If you go g4, you can just go there. g5, take. And the king literally just shoulders the other king. So then you can just march. Forward, you just continue to shoulder. Shoulder. Push. Really cool idea. So after king a1, rook b2 played. Rook takes a3, rook takes h2. Let's see what happens in this rook ending. King has to come back now. Rook d2. So then the rook can come here. When the rooks come off, just like we saw before, black's king is just so close to these pawns, black is going to be completely winning. Rook a6 coming into g6, but Karpov just takes a move out. King f5 to stop it. Rook g7 attacking that pawn. Push. Rook a6. Now that pawn moves, this pawn is under attack. But Karpov plays a really cool move. g4. He just ignores it. Because this pawn is going to drop. He's calculated a bit further than Kasparov. Take the pawn. Rook g2. There's no good way to defend that pawn. Rook h5 check. King in. Push. And this is another really cool move from black. He doesn't even take it. He plays rook f2. Because this pawn is now further advanced, it is a weakness. King comes in, king f3. The king is temporarily in front of the rook, but this rook is just doing its job. There's no way this pawn is going to become a queen. King d1 played. Take. King e1. King g2. Rook g5. g3. This pawn is further advanced than this, even though it is only a rook and pawn each. Black is winning. Let's see how he did it. Rook f4. King e2. Rook e4 check. King controls all these squares. The rook controls all these, forcing the king away. And then king f3. Defending the rook, giving yourself the chance to push. This pawn is further advanced than this. Black is winning. Rook h1. Trying to hold from the back. g2. Rook h3 check, and only one move to win. Notice in this position, rook checks the king. White's king is attacking the rook. But black has to attack white's rook, and that is the beautiful move. King attacks rook. King attacks rook. This pawn is going to advance. This pawn is too slow. Rook h8. Still there are tricks. You can't get a queen yet, because check. So rook f4 first. By the way, there's an absolutely brilliant tactical move here. And it's because you want to lure the king, so then it's going to be a check. So this is a brilliant move. Karpov missed. Rook e3 check. When do you ever get the chance to play a brilliant move like this in the endgame? The point is, if you take, you queen, and it is check. When you move, then you can take this. Wow, what a move. Rook e3 check. Karpov missed it. He played rook f4 instead. Keeping an eye on this. Cutting the king off. King comes back. Rook takes f5, and in this position, white resigned. But why did he give up? Because at the moment it looks like white's got a check, and then he's stopping the pawn at the moment, temporarily. But let's see what happens. Check. King here. Check. King here. Check. You keep checking, you keep checking, you keep checking. But you can't push your pawn. So how does black break through? Well, let's say you play this move, just to stop the black king coming out. Now you throw in a check. If the king moves, and this is the key point, you've got space. You just come here. Game over. Queen next, and you can't stop it. If you go rook here, you get a queen. Rook will come off for a queen. King against rook, game over. If you try this move, by the way, it doesn't actually work because you can still get a queen. This is really one last trick you can try. Check is not checkmate because black has this move, just a block. Karpov is up 2-0 in the match. The score is 4-2 to Karpov. Thanks a lot for watching all the way until the end. If you enjoyed the video, why not give it a like and subscribe to the channel at the same time. To see more Karpov-Kasparov videos. If you press the bell, that means YouTube will let you know when I release a new video. Thanks a lot.